JonBenet Ramsey. The second fucking time. Christmas morning is generally a joyous time for families. For the Ramsey family, though, a morning of gifts and an early morning flight on their private plane to their vacation home was replaced with the garroting, blunt force trauma, sexual assault, and fatal sustained aggression against the 6-year-old, last known to be asleep in her bed. This is the case of JonBenet Ramsey. Welcome to Enter the Dark. Hello and welcome to Enter the Dark. I am Jan. With me as always is Les. How's it going, Les?
It's all good, man.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Brought you a nice little fun one for Christmas Day. It's Christmas themed. It's JonBenet Ramsey.
It's good.
Yeah.
Like many Christmases that come around perennially.
But, you know,
JonBenet Ramsey seems to come
this was
round.
Originally going to be the 2023 Christmas episode. However, Casey Anthony decided to release her bullshit documentary, so we watched that. So we didn't have to.
We had to react to that.
So, Merry Christmas. Hope you had a good day. And now, speaking of good days, let's talk about our patrons who give us enough money to say their names. They are Amanda Weaver, Kelly Weaver, Liv Templeton, Elizabeth Lee, Christopher Francis, Verena Schmid, Angelina Cheshire, Cookie Fanner, Mandy Madden, Yulata Pang, Becky Louise, Jules Henderson, Casey the Cannibal, and Amanda Champagne. And also we've got our freebie members who are Nicola Walker, Slashing B, Lisa O'Neill, Heather Hill, Misty Dawn, Alexander Gutierrez, Melanie, and Ayumi Hajime. Welcome. Thank you for all for supporting us.
Misty Dawn. What a name.
But if you do want to support us, the best way you can do it is just watching the videos, liking, commenting, subscribing, putting the notification bell, all that bollocks on. Or if you do want to throw some money our way just for funsies or just hang out for free, you can do. Just go to www.patreon.com/Enter the Dark. Anything from $1 all the way up to $50. You get free stuff, and also our merch shop is coming up here now for you. You can get loads of cool t-shirts and stuff. But enough of that. You're here for the gore. Let's get into this. JonBenet Ramsey. So, on the 6th of August 1990 in Atlanta, Georgia, JonBenet was born to parents Patsy and John Ramsey. With her mother's training, JonBenet started to compete in children's beauty contests from an early age, winning multiple titles, including Little Miss Colorado Sunburst in 1995.
Can we just sort of admit that these beauty pageants are weird?
Yeah, they're weird as fuck.
I know you've got the Little Miss Sunshine thing. Cute film.
But no, it's
strange. It's strange.
It's a strange thing, and people shouldn't put the kids in it.
Why would you overly sexualize your kids like that? It's odd.
So anyway, Patsy Ramsey was born Patricia Poor in 1956, and she was a former pageant performer herself, winning Miss West Virginia in 1977. Attending West Virginia University, Patsy graduated with a BA in journalism in 1978. 2 years later, she married John, and their son Burke was born in 1987. Now, John Ramsey was 13 years Patsy's senior, and he was born in 1943 in Nebraska. In 1966, he joined the Navy as a Civil Engineer Corps officer in the Philippines and Atlanta. Before meeting Patsy, John already had 3 grown-up children with his ex-wife. The marriage ended when John had an affair with a co-worker. In 1992, John's daughter Beth was killed in a car accident in Chicago, aged 22. In 1989, Ramsey formed the Advanced Product Group, which later merged with several other companies to become Access Graphics, a computer services company that became a subsidiary of aerospace, defense and technologies industry giant Lockheed Martin. John was given the role as CEO and president of Access Graphics. Now, after the birth of JonBenet, the family moved to Boulder, Colorado in 1991 for John's work. The family owned 2 private jets, a yacht, a holiday home in Michigan, and their net worth in 1996 was reported to be $6.4 million, which would be, in today's money, $11,624,318.
Do you ever feel like monetary figures start losing their value after a certain zero.
Yeah, when you sort of hit millions, then that's it. You've made it.
And that's my thing. It's like when people are like, you're a billionaire, it's like, do you own money or do you just own debt? Like,
yeah, it's weird, isn't it? It's like someone will be like, I'm a billionaire, but they've got no liquid assets. It's all tied up in things. So they're worth this amount. But if they wanted to go and just go, here's £1 billion to charity, they couldn't do it. It's not like they've got a bank account with £1 billion.
It's really bizarre. But then like people are like, well, we're in debt. We're this much £1 billion in debt. And it's like, who to? Yeah. Fucking Mars.
Yeah, we don't fuck it. It's like the world's something like 8 trillion in debt. And it's like, dude, we don't fucking know any. The economy's fake anyway.
Economic rant from two
working
boys.
Working class people who have to work fucking long hours and use YouTube as a side hustle. Prior to the murder of their daughter, John and Patsy Ramsey's life seemed almost ideal. Patsy was a former beauty queen and she was married to a successful businessman. It's an American dream. The Ramseys had readily adapted their new life in Colorado and had many new friends. They built a large house in an elite suburb and entertained often. The last party in Boulder was just 3 days before the murder, and it was a particularly happy occasion. Over 100 guests were present at the Christmas function. Now, they were celebrating for 2 reasons. Patsy had warded off a recurrence of her ovarian cancer, and John had been voted Boulder's Businessman of the Year. According to I mean, it's an achievement in itself, isn't it?
It's an achievement. 2 achievements there. I mean, Boulder,
Colorado, you know. According to the Ramseys' testimony, they drove home a few blocks from a party at a friend's house on Christmas night. JonBenet had fallen asleep in the car, so they carried her up the stairs to her room, put her to bed around 9:30 p.m. Shortly after, Patsy and John went to bed, as they planned to get up early to prepare for a trip to their holiday home on Lake Michigan. The next day, Patsy woke up just after 5 a.m. and walked down the stairs to the kitchen. On the staircase, she found a 2.5-page note that said JonBenet had been kidnapped by a small foreign faction and was being held for ransom of $118,000, the exact amount of John Ramsey's bonus that year.
That's particularly egregious, isn't it?
Okay, so here's the note, okay? And I'm going to do it in a small foreign faction voice. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. We are a group of individuals who represent a small foreign faction. We respect your business, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed, and if you do want to see her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in a brown paper bag. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you to arrange an earlier delivery of the money and hence an earlier pickup of your daughter. Any deviation of my instructions will result in immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The 2 gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you do not provoke them. Speaking to anyone about our situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If you mark the money in any way, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies.
I mean, that's like kind of... I mean, when you say small foreign faction, I think of a bunch of Lithuanian dwarves.
It could have been Lithuanian dwarves.
It could have been Lithuanian dwarves, because they're small, and they're a foreign faction. Don't at me. Fucking don't at me.
We don't know who killed it, so, you know.
I'm just throwing out speculations. You don't know.
No. Anyway, let me get back on with it. You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. But following our instructions, you stand a 100% chance of her getting back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult.
That's what they said. Like, seriously.
Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now. Victory, SBTC. God, tell you what, being a small foreign faction wrecks your voice.
I was going to say, like, it's hard being a dwarf.
It is. Anyway, Patsy yelled to John as she ran back up the stairs and opened the door to JonBenet's room. Finding she wasn't there, they made the decision to call the police. Did you not read the note? You called the police. She dies. The 911 dispatcher recorded Patsy's call at 5:25 a.m. The police arrived at the house 7 minutes later. You can tell that they weren't a black family.
Because they arrived, like, within...
It's 7 minutes. Yeah. My kid's missing. Like, oh, wait 24 hours.
I wonder, like, if, like, the police, like, in that part of the world, do, like, sort of fucking financial check on them. It's like, but also, like, sort of racial checks. So it's like,
hello,
are you white? Do you earn over 50k a year?
They probably just were like, phone the real number, like 912 or something that they give to, like, rich white people.
Have you got more than 2 cars?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. Like, we're round, like, we're there. Just hold on. You must be preserved at all costs.
Right. So the note was written in a black felt tip marker pen and a blocky handwriting, believed to be someone belonged to extremely nervous or consciously attempting to disguise his or her normal style, possibly by writing with non-dominant hand. Before long, the patrol supervisor, Sergeant Paul Reichenbach, came to the house. The note had warned against...
That was, like, seriously his name.
He'd been warned against notifying the police, something just about any parent would do regardless of the threat, and if the house was under surveillance or scrutiny, as the note said, the presence of 2 marked patrol cars would have been quite obvious. She dies. Along with Reichenbach, 2 sets of Ramsey's close friends, Fleet and Priscilla White and John and Barbara Fernie, responded to Patsy's frantic phone calls and came over. The Whites had hosted Christmas dinner the previous evening. It was the second year that the Ramseys and Whites had spent Christmas together. Reichenbach called for more personnel, including a crime scene evidence team and someone from victim witness office. He instructed the telephone company to institute a trap and trace on Ramsey's line, then notified the detective supervisor on call, Sergeant Robert Whitson. He directed there be no further police radio traffic in case the kidnappers had access to a police scanner. Reichenbach conducted a quick survey of the house, including JonBenet's room. He found no obvious signs of forced entry. His observations were consistent with French's. Patsy was verging on hysteria, while John was calm and composed. According to witnesses, they did not seem to interact much, especially once the Whites and the Fernies arrived. The 2 women took Patsy into the sunroom off the living room to sit with her and comfort her. Now, even at this early stage, we are already starting to see some problems with the investigation. So the premises from which a victim has presumably been kidnapped are a crime scene and treated as such to preserve potential crucial clues. All investigators operate according to the theory of transfer, which states no one enters or exits a room without leaving something behind or taking something away. Therefore, more people at the scene, and this includes police officers, the more corrupted the scene will be. It is perfectly understandable that the Ramseys would want their closest friends around them, but valuable evidence could already have been destroyed. The first choice would be to remove everyone from the house and take them to the police station or some other location and to secure the house and the grounds.
Did they not do that?
No.
Because that would have been the most.
That would have been, I think there was only like 1 murder in Boulder that year, so police don't really know how to deal with murders.
Yeah,
but it's fucking logical.
It is logical.
If you've seen any sort of police thing, you're like, okay, this is a crime scene.
Have they never watched Clue? Everybody's a fucking suspect.
Play fucking Cluedo. Gosh, Jesus. So.
It's a board game.
Yeah.
Do the board game. It's not hard.
But
Boulder, Colorado police who named their state after a fucking rock.
Yeah, man.
I'm not going to get fucking over this.
Didn't name the state, did they? Name the city.
The city.
The state's called Colorado.
But then you got the Rocky Mountains. It's some Flintstones. It's Flintstone shit.
Anyway, so first thing is take him out to all the locations, secure the house. But it wasn't deemed practical for whatever reasons, such as the need to wait for a phone call from the kidnapper, and everyone had to be there. Then they needed to be contained in one place where they would not corrupt the entire scene. But should they not have been allowed to wander the house freely, particularly in obviously critical areas such as JonBenet's room? Unfortunately, these mistakes will be compounded as morning wore on. At one point, Fleet White attempted to help out by conducting his own search. On the far wall of a storage room in the labyrinth basement, a small broken window immediately caught his attention. In another part of the basement, White also walked through the small furnace room towards the door to another storage room the Ramseys referred to as the wine cellar. It was completely dark, and when White opened the door, he couldn't find a light switch, so he reclosed the door and returned upstairs. There, John Ramsey explained that he himself had broken the window Fleet had seen some months earlier when he had returned to their house empty without his key. Now, this time, 2 victim advocates had arrived to offer emotional support for the Ramseys and act as liaisons with the police. But this further complicated the scene. As one officer left the house to bring a ransom note to the police headquarters, the Ramseys' pastor, the Reverend Roll Hooverstock from St. John's Episcopal Church, also arrived. During this time, Burke Ramsey was awakened and was told that his sister was missing. He was dressed and taken from the house to the Whites. John and Patsy wanted him removed from the tension and trauma as much as possible, but this action could be criticised. If JonBenet had presumably been kidnapped by unknown parties for unknown reasons, how much sense does it make to bring Burke to an unsecured location, and why did the police accede to it? As with many aspects of this case, you're going to see there's at least 2 explanations possible. Positive side, you could say times like this, under stress, you tend to think in a linear, sort of result-orientated, straight-away manner. So John and Patsy didn't want him traumatised for life by what was going on, so they took him to a place they felt more comfortable. The police agreed to this because they were sensitive to the same things the Ramseys were. But the negative part of that would hold that if one or both of the Ramseys had been the perpetrator, they would know that Bert was in no danger away from them, and the negative judgment on the police would be that they blew it. They should never let potential victim and or material witness out of their protection. Yet one, that is, the Ramseys or the police, could easily have said that the kidnapper had wanted Burke. He would have taken him at the same time he took JonBenet. At the White's house, though, Burke would be under constant visual supervision, and no one is going to brazenly break in broad daylight and grab him. So Sergeant Whitson put detectives on the case and then informed Boulder County Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office, in the person of Peter Hofstrom, Chief of the Felony Division. According to Steve Thomas, the detective who was to play a major role in the investigation, a canine unit with a tracking dog was also put on standby, but for some strange reason was never used. You're going to use dogs, aren't you?
You're going to use dogs. Maybe they never used the dogs, but the dogs were there. Maybe it was just like...
They were like, dogs are on standby, but they never called them out. It's weird, isn't it? So John Ramsey called his friend Rod Westmoreland, an attorney and vice president of Merrill Lynch's Atlanta office, to arrange for the ransom money. John and Patsy had met in Atlanta and lived there until John's successful regional computer distribution company, Microsouth, merged with 2 others to form Access Graphics, with the central office being located in Boulder. Now, John moved there to become chief executive, and Patsy and the children followed after Patsy found the 1920s house on 15th Street. Patsy's father, Donald Poor, a former Union Carbide executive, worked for John's company at Atlanta and had also moved to Boulder. Now, Access, who topped $1 billion in annual sales, was then sold to Lockheed Martin, which kept John as chief executive. Now, in spite of all the relocation of the family out west, the Ramseys still essentially considered themselves Atlantans, and Patsy, a native West Virginian, Mountain Mama, who had also represented the state in the Miss America pageant, missed many aspects of the Southern lifestyle. So, Westmoreland tracked down at his parents' home in Tupelo, Mississippi, quickly went on to work on the money. He called the bank to tell John that he had arranged for a $118,000 credit line on his Visa card, which would translate to a cash advance at any local bank. Needless to say, anytime the phone rang, the police immediately snapped to attention, expecting that it might be a kidnapper calling. Little after 8 a.m, Sergeant Whitson contacted John Eller, commander of the Boulder PD Detective Division. So, like many other people, he was out of town vacationing with his family in Florida. Within a few minutes of this call, detectives Linda Arndt and Fred Patterson arrived on the scene, having already seen the ransom note and been apprised of the situation thus far. Now, John called Michael Archuleta, a private pilot who was to fly the Ramsey plane, a 1972 twin-engine Beechcraft King Air C-90, to Charlevoix, Michigan, and told him what had happened. John's two older children from his first marriage, Melinda and John Andrew, and Melinda's fiancé, Stuart Long, had planned to fly from Atlanta to Minneapolis, where they would be picked up by the Ramsey plane, and then they'd all proceed to Charlevoix. John asked Mike to reach them in Minneapolis airport and have them divert to Denver. Now, John's oldest daughter, Elizabeth, called Beth, she was the one who'd been killed in the automobile accident when she was 22, and he'd been devastated by the loss of her, going into an extended mourning, but by his own account had come out of the ordeal with his faith renewed and strengthened. The Beechcraft plane was named for Beth. Now, police officers began questioning the Ramseys, trying to piece together an official version of the story. Both of them thought that all of the doors had been locked the previous night. According to Steve Thomas's account, there was some discrepancy in Patsy's story as to whether she checked JonBenet's room and found it empty, which had prompted her to go downstairs looking for her and to find the note, or whether she had found the note first and then gone to the bedroom to check. Now, while this could be significant if Patsy was, in fact, still working on getting her story straight, or it could be that she's in shock because her daughter's missing and she's just found it. So it can be a case of, is it this? Is it that? You know, but both parents remembered leaving the White's house about 8:30, making two brief stops to leave gifts at the house of other friends, and returning home shortly after 9. JonBenet fell asleep in the car and John carried her into the house and upstairs to her room where Patsy got her ready for bed. They say she did not wake up during any of this, and John went to attend to Burke, but the boy insisted on completing an assembly of a Christmas toy. By the time John put him to bed and came up to his own room and converted attic space on the 3rd floor, Patsy was already in bed, and he took a melatonin tablet to help him sleep and set the alarm clock for 5:30 a.m. Now, the detectives asked John if he could think of anyone who might have taken JonBenet or might wish him harm. The first person he thought of was Jeff Merrick, a long-time Access Graphics employee who had been let go and was apparently extremely bitter about it. He had filed a complaint with Lockheed Martin, and John was told by several people that Merrick had threatened to bring back down both him and Access. Now, Patsy's first thought when asked a similar question was Linda Hoffman Pugh, their housekeeper. Now, Patsy said that Linda had been acting strangely and asked to borrow $2,500 because she couldn't pay her rent. Patsy also recalled that her own mother, Nedra, had told her that Linda once remarked, "JonBenet is so pretty, aren't you afraid that someone might kidnap her?" The police sent out officers to interview Hoffman Pugh and her husband in nearby Fort Lupton. In the meantime, the 8 to 10 window in which the kidnapper said he would call had come and gone. At one point, John was seen going through the mail, and rumours surfaced that he had left the house to go and get it. But in fact, the mail came into the house through a slot in the door, which we all have in England, which I find weird that Americans don't.
No, they have those little
boxes.
Boxes.
Yeah,
so many people can just take your mail.
I find that weird. Anyway, several people have commented on the apparent nonchalance and detachment this demonstrates, but John says he was anxious to see if there was any communication from the kidnapper. By lunchtime, no word had come, and the various police officials began leaving the house and returning to station to work the case. The two victim advocates had also gone. This left Detective Linda Arndt as the only police officer at the scene to supervise 7 civilians. John and Patsy Ramsey, Fleet and Priscilla White, who'd returned after taking Burke to their house to be watched, John and Barbara Fernie, the Reverend Rod Hoverstock. Now, Arndt was completely uncomfortable with this arrangement and called Detective Sergeant Larry Mason for backup. That's a good sergeant name, isn't it?
Larry Mason. Larry
Mason. Like, we're like, Sergeant Larry Mason.
Larry Mason.
Yeah. But apparently, no backup came. So she was just stuck there. Larry Mason plays by his own rules.
He does. He's a maverick.
Now,
he's a cop living on the edge.
He's a loose cannon cop on the edge. In what may have been an attempt to keep John occupied while dealing with everyone by herself, around 1 in the afternoon, Arndt asked him to take one of the other men and look through the house to see if they could find anything new or possibly related to the crime. John asked Fleet White to accompany him and suggested they begin in the basement and work their way up. John and Fleet went through the basement room by room, past the table set up with Burke's electric trains. They came to the broken window and they found several small splinters of glass on the floor. John figured these were probably still from his unusual entry the previous summer. It certainly seems odd, though, that they didn't have that window fixed all of those months.
Well, yeah.
But it's a low crime.
Negligent.
It is, but it's a low crime area, so they're like, get it done.
But also, you're going to clear the glass off the floor.
Mm-hmm. But the Ramseys, they also had a burglar alarm, but they hadn't used it for months because the children kept accidentally setting it off.
Yeah. We know.
Now, John and Fleet noticed a suitcase resting near the window. If there had been an intruder and the window was his point of exit, he could have used it as a step, but since the two men moved it in their search, that's difficult to say. This is why you don't send people to do the police job. So they looked through crawl spaces under the dining room and then retraced their steps into the furnace room, coming to the wine cellar door that Fleet had looked in earlier and found pitch black. But as soon as John opened the door, he saw something and, according to White, screamed, "Oh my God! Oh my God!" Now, John raced in and found JonBenet lying on her back on the floor with a white blanket wrapped around her torso. Her hands were stretched over her head, tightly bound with a thin cord. A piece of black duct tape covered her mouth, and next to her body was one of the favourite pink nightgowns. Now, Fleet touched JonBenet's ankle. It was cold. He turned and raced up the stairs for help. John knelt down over her, ripped the tape from her mouth, pulled off the blanket, and began trying to loosen the wrist binding. All the while, he begged her to talk to him, and her eyes were closed. He picked her up and carried her stiff body upright around the waist, up the stairs into the living room where Linda Arndt was. Now, Fleet had already come upstairs and shouted for someone to call an ambulance. John laid JonBenet on the floor next to the Christmas tree, uttering words of comfort while Arndt checked for vital signs. But the detective could see that the child was in full rigor mortis and her lips were blue. Fleet then went back to the basement where he picked up a piece of duct tape that made two people who touched that duct tape now.
That's weird.
Now, before Patsy came back into the room, John covered JonBenet's body with another blanket, as if he was tucking her into bed. Reverend Roll Hoverstock saw what was happening and began praying out loud. When he completed his prayer, he informed John that he had performed the last rites at the Episcopal Church over JonBenet. Thanks. There are conflicting versions of what Patsy did at this point. Now, according to Steve Thomas's account, which presumably came from police officers, as soon as the Fleet came shouting upstairs, Priscilla White and Barbara Fernie hurried towards the sound, while Patsy did not move from the couch in the sunroom. She came in a few moments later, supported by her friends. Now, according to John Ramsey's account, Patsy essentially fought away into the living room, rushing past him and falling onto JonBenet's body, screaming and crying hysterically. It is then generally agreed that she implored Hoverstock to do something to the effect of, "Jesus, you raised Lazarus from the dead, raise my baby from the dead." Jesus is like, "Look, it's my fucking birthday. I get one day off. I'm not."
He's just like, what?
And he's like, do you know what? Don't test me. At least raise Lazarus from the dead, yeah, but, you know.
I did like the fucking wine at the wedding of fucking Canaan. Do you not think that's what I'm doing on my birthday?
It's like I'm here with my dad, who's also me.
So also me, which is weird. It's a weird relationship. So it's like, how are you doing, Jesus? It's just like, well, how are you doing? It's like, you know.
Yeah, we know.
It's like, should we make loads of wine? Yeah. Should we do fishes and loaves? Maybe after. See how hungover people are feeling.
Yeah. But whatever the exact timing or sequence was, at one moment, John Ramsey and Linda Arndt were face to face kneeling over JonBenet's body. It was right after Arndt had searched in vain for a pulse, and John asked if his daughter was still alive. She looked him in the eye and told him JonBenet was dead, and he emitted a low groan of anguish. Now, this is where the narrative starts to get a bit strange. John and Patsy were both feeling that Arndt had been extremely solicitous and sensitive towards them, and continued to feel so throughout the agonised afternoon and the days ahead. But other members of the police department apparently had the same impression. In fact, at some later point, certain other detectives were annoyed that Patsy would speak with Arndt, but not with them. But 3 years after these events, when she'd left Boulder Police Force, Arndt recalled the scene differently when she appeared on a nationally broadcast television programme. And as we looked at each other, I remember I wore a shoulder holster, tucking my gun right next to me, consciously counting, I've got 18 bullets, because I didn't know if we'd all be alive when people showed up. She went on to say everything made sense in that instance, and I knew what happened.
What?
So the implication is she felt that John had killed his daughter, or had at least taken part in it.
So she felt that John had, killed his daughter, or either...
So she's got, he's like...
And she's like, I can...
She's
pop off some caps.
Basically, she's like, if all these people have done it, I've got 18 bullets, I need to take them all down.
Ends up like a Wicker Man situation, that does. I've got 18, and then they're gonna, fucking eviscerate me. It's weird.
Not the bees. Anyway, as the case suddenly turned from kidnapping to murder, Linda directed John to call 911 again, and when that didn't provide immediate results, she called twice more on her own. She would soon get back up she'd been requesting: more police, an FBI special agent from Denver field office, the fire department, and an ambulance with paramedics. Boulder Police Chief Tom Kobe called Detective Commander John Alley, told him his help was urgently needed. Now, amidst the new clamour and turmoil, Detective Sergeant Larry Mason asked John Ramsey his plans. John's instincts were to get the family back to Atlanta, where his parents and his brother Jeff were, and when already knew he wanted to bury his daughter near Beth in the cemetery in Marietta, Georgia, Mason told him the family should stay in the area at least for several days. According to John, he said they would. The police say they overheard a telephone conversation in which John told Mike to prepare the plane to fly to Atlanta and considered it suspicious that he wanted to get out of town so quickly. The police now wanted the house cleared. One of the Fernies suggested that the Ramseys go to the Fernies' house in South Boulder. Just as they were leaving through the front door around 2:15, a taxi pulled up with John Andrew, Melinda Ramsey and Stuart Long, who'd taken the first flight they could from Minnesota after getting the message from Mike Architula. Now, John went to them and said, JonBenet is gone, and everyone erupted in a new flood of tears. At about the same time, Detective Thomas Turillo arrived with the consent to search form, which he handed to Larry Mason, who asked John to sign it. He did so, later saying he thought he was signing a consent form for an autopsy to be performed on JonBenet.
Oh, okay.
So then the Ramseys drove to the Fernies' home, where Fleetwhite would bring Burke, and they would have a 24-hour police guard. What they didn't know at the time was those officers were trying to listen in on every word that they said. Though the scene was already hopelessly compromised, detectives went about the collection of evidence. The most crucial piece was the ransom note itself, which fortunately had already been taken in and preserved. Sergeant Whitson asked the Ramseys for handwritings examples to compare the note, and John had quickly given him two white-lined legal tablets. One had been lying on the kitchen countertop and contained Patsy's notes, doodles and shopping lists. The other was on a table in the hallway not far from the spiral staircase on which Patsy had found the note and contained John's writings. Whitson marked the top sheets John and Patsy. The two pads were taken to the police department and given to Detective Jeff Cathcart, the forgery and fraud expert. As he was going through Patsy's pad, Cathcart noticed something weird. Towards the middle of the tablet, a few words were written on a page in black felted pen. Mr. and Mrs., along with a downstroke which could have easily beginning of a capital R. The paper appeared the same one the ransom note was written on. Apparently this was the first draft. After consideration, the writer decided to address the note to Mr. Ramsey only. What this meant, of course, is the police could now say with a fair degree of certainty that the 3-page ransom note was written in the Ramsey house using their own pad and paper.
Okay.
Now, this narrowed the scenario considerably. Either an intruder or intruders had spent a fair amount of time in a house undiscovered, or JonBenet had been killed by one or more of the 3 individuals known to be in the house at the same time: John, Patsy, and Burke. When a child is murdered in or near the home, the parents or close family members are always high on the initial suspect list. Statistics say that they're the likely killers. As a rule of thumb, the younger the child, the more probable a family member was involved. This was certainly well known to Special Agent Ron Walker of the Bureau's Denver field office, who had been called in to consult on the case. He advised the Boulder police to look closely at the parents. This was the highest percentage shot in a case like this. He also pledged whatever assistance the FBI, the police would like. Similar offers would soon come from Denver PD and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Since the passage of the Lindbergh Law, the FBI had primary jurisdiction in a kidnapping case. But once a body is found, it becomes a local matter because homicide is a state crime. Then the Bureau can do no more than offer whatever assistance the local agency wishes to. So the FBI can provide an evidence response team, profiling and criminal investigative analysis, lab facilities, legal advice, major case computer management, cover out-of-state leads, liaison, and wherever they want. But they have to be requested, and unfortunately none of these services were used early on to an extent that could have made a difference in the investigation. Now, the Boulder PD was sure that they didn't need the help of the FBI, even though the city has only suffered, on average, a single homicide a year. Now, regardless of how good they thought they were, there's no way they could have the depth to work a homicide the way a major department such as New York or Denver could. Evidently, this one looked pretty straightforward to them, even though the crime scene itself was already a fucking mess.
Hey. What? It's ridiculous. They're just not.
They're just like, we've got all this help you can have. No, I don't want it. Like, why? I'm just like, I don't want it. Now, Linda Arndt and Larry Mason came back to the Fernies' house several times the following day to talk to the Ramseys. At one point, Arndt asked John and Patsy to come down to the police station and ask them questions more formally. Patsy was distraught, heavily sedated, and proclaiming she wanted to die. John didn't feel she was in any shape to leave the house and be subjected to the rigours of a police interview. The police had high-profile murder investigation on their hands, and they kind of often or usually ends up with parental involvement. They wanted to lock the parents each into their own story. Now, the Ramseys' friend Michael Bynum was at the Fernies paying a condolence call when Linda Arndt made the interview request of John. Bynum was an attorney who'd been a prosecutor in the Boulder District Attorney's Office and was now in private practice with a large local firm. He told John he was wary of how he was being treated and asked if John and Patsy would like to make some decisions on their behalf. John said he was only too grateful to have the help of a close friend. So Bynum immediately told the police that the Ramseys were not going down to the police station to be interviewed at this time because he didn't feel they were in the shape for it. He then contacted Brian Morgan, a prominent Denver attorney and one of the named partners of Haddon, Morgan and Foreman, and asked to represent John. Bynum got another attorney, Patrick Burke, to represent Patsy. Now, the post-mortem exam was conducted by Dr. Johnny Mayer, a pathologist and coroner of Boulder County. Mayer had been called to the Ramsey house around 8 p.m. on December 26th to conduct a brief examination and officially pronounced JonBenet dead. During that 10-minute look, he noted a ligature around her right wrist, and when the body had turned over, another around the neck, so tight it dug a furrow into the skin. It was a garrote knotted in the back and was fastened with a broken 4-inch stick that had been used to tighten it. JonBenet was wearing a gold cross and chain, and they were tangled in the ligature. A small area of abrasion and contusion on the cheek near the right ear, and a prominent dried abrasion on the lower left side of her neck. The broken stick turned out to be part of a paintbrush handle from Patsy's painting kit in the basement. The kit itself was right outside the wine cellar door, meaning that it's first-hand implement the killer would have noticed. Now, JonBenet was wearing long underwear over floral print panties, both of which were stained with urine. A red stain consistent with blood was also in the crotch, and at the time it was believed that semen deposits were found in the pants or on her leg. This report later turned out to be erroneous. Now, the actual autopsy took place in the coroner's lab in the basement of Boulder Community Hospital. In addition to the observations he made at the house, Mayer noted tiny petechial hemorrhages on the eyelids. Further hemorrhaging appeared on the side of the ligature furrow around the neck. Dry blood was found around the entrance of her vagina, as well as the hyperemia or engorged blood vessels, indicating possible trauma in the tissue around or just inside the vagina. The hymen was not intact, and abrasions along the vaginal wall were visible. The fingernails were clipped for lab analysis, and Mayer reported occasional scattered petechial hemorrhage from the surface of each lung and the anterior surface of the heart.
Oh, God, that must be the most awful job in the world.
I know. So when he made an incision and pulled back the scalp, Mayer saw a large 7x4-inch area of hemorrhage on the right side. Underneath was an even larger skull fracture, approximately 8.5 inches long. A thin film of subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is bleeding under the membrane covering the brain, overlays the entire right cerebral hemisphere. Underneath, the grey matter of the brain itself was bruised. The small intestine contained fragmented pieces of semi-digested fruit that Mayer believed to be pineapple. This detail became more important as the investigation went on because neither John nor Patsy recalled JonBenet eating anything after they left the Whites.
What's the significance then of pineapple?
You'll find out. In fact, she fell asleep in the car and did not wake up, and John carried her upstairs or when Patsy prepared her for bed. Yet the state of the pineapple in the intestine suggests it was eaten that day or evening with a bowl with cut pineapple was noted in the Ramsey kitchen.
Okay.
So the bowl was processed for prints, and Patsy's and Burke's were found, but not JonBenet's. Police put this out as an inconsistency in Patsy's story. Patsy and John said they were perplexed by finding it had no explanation. The bottom line was that JonBenet had been strangled with a garrote-style ligature and had suffered massive blunt force trauma to the right side of her head, though there was, and still is, some question about how that injury occurred first. Either would have been sufficient to kill her. The petechial hemorrhages on the insides of the eyelids, as well as other places, coupled with the lack of substantial bleeding from a head wound, suggests that strangulation was first. By the time of the head injury, her heart was no longer pumping or was pumping only weakly. The official cause of death was listed as asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Everything that had touched JonBenet's body was collected. Clothing, blankets, and the silk blouse and jeans Linda Arndt was wearing when she leaned over the dead child. In the house, police technicians reviewed the scene in the basement where the body was and discovered the area around the broken window. There were pieces of glass outside the window and a scuff mark on the wall. During the search, Detective Michael Everett found Patsy's painting box from which the wooden stick used in the garrote had come. Splinters on the floor next to the box indicated that this was where it had been broken. It was then logical to surmise that here or near here where the garroting had taken place rather than upstairs in the bedroom. So on the second floor in the bathroom off JonBenet's bedroom, investigators found a balled-up red turtleneck, which Patsy said JonBenet had been wearing when she went to bed. No one seemed to know how it ended up here. Next to the spiral staircase and opposite JonBenet's bedroom, there was a stacked washer-dryer unit and laundry room-type wall cabinets. One of the cabinets was open with a package of pull-up diapers visible. This seemed odd in a household with a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, but JonBenet, advanced for her age in most other ways, had a fairly chronic problem with wetting the bed and to a lesser extent, wetting herself. The bedwetting was so common that Linda Hoffman Pugh reported that even before she got to work in the morning, Patsy would routinely strip JonBenet's bedsheets and put them into the washer-dryer. The bedwetting became critical in the investigation because it suggested a possible motive for one parent and hinted at possible behaviour from the other. Now, it will be suggested that Patsy had accidentally fatally injured her daughter when she lost it with her over the bedwetting, and it would also suggest that JonBenet's wetting and occasional soiling were a reaction to sexual advances and abuse by her father. Now,
Do you not think that's a bit of a reach?
it is, but if you're looking at the parents.
Mm.
Now, you can point the finger at blame many people so far, but there was a power struggle going on that's going to impede this investigation further. So the Boulder PD under Thomas Kobe, who was the chief, and the Boulder County District Attorney's Office under long-time elected DA Alex Hunter were enemy camps. They didn't see eye to eye on how the law should be administered in this well-off, very liberal, free-thinking community that was often referred to as the People's Republic of Boulder. Crime rate was low, and what crime there was, the DA's office was usually able to keep out of court, and what the police considered absurdly generous and inappropriate plea bargains. So this is an oversimplification of this issue, but rather than working together, they were always at cross purposes. Now, this antagonism reached a boiling point within a few days of the murder and contributed incredibly to the mutual mistrust between the police department and the Ramseys. Once Dr. Mayer completed the autopsy, Commander Allen and Chief Kobe still had questions, mainly relating to the actual cause of death, the weapon used in blunt force trauma, and the meaning and significance of the vaginal abrasions. On the other side, the Ramseys wanted their daughter's body to return to them for burial. This message came to the police through District Attorney's Office via Assistant DA and Felony Division Chief Pete Hofstrom. Now, according to Steve Thomas's account, Hofstrom informed John Eller that the Ramseys want the remains back. The police were already annoyed because the direct communication between Ramseys and the DA's office, rather than them, meant they were dealing through lawyers rather than them directly. They particularly didn't like the fact that Haddon Morgan had close ties with several members of Alex Hunter's staff. Eller told Hofstrom that he, the police chief, and the coroner had decided to hold the body for further tests. Eller was also irritated by his inability to get the Ramseys in for individual formal interviews. Hofstrom then told Eller that the police could not ransom the body in exchange for an interview. Eller didn't see it this way. Mike Bynum did, and the consequent bad blood between the police and the Ramseys on one hand and the police and the DA on the other hand would never go away. Now, the Ramseys technically won this round through their attorneys and Hofstrom's insistence. The police did eventually release the body, which the Ramseys brought back to Georgia for burial next to Beth. Now, a memorial service was held for JonBenet on Sunday, December 29th at St. John's Episcopal Church, not far from John's office at the Pearl Street Mall in downtown Boulder. It was Patsy's 40th birthday. Happy birthday, Patsy.
Happy birthday. Here we go.
The family.
What are we doing today? We're in court.
The family then flew to Atlanta for the funeral and burial on Tuesday, December the 31st. On Saturday morning, the day before the memorial service, Linda Arndt and Larry Mason had gone to the Fernie's home wanting to set up formal questioning with the Ramseys. John spent about 40 minutes with them there and 2 lawyers in attendance, but Patsy was still highly medicated and in no condition to speak. In giving the officers some family background, he told them something about Patsy that apparently they had not known. In June of 1993, after complaining of severe back and shoulder pains and a progressively distending belly on her normally trim and well-cared-for figure, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. Originally labelled as stage 3, she was soon downgraded to stage 4, the worst and most ominous designation, when it was found how far the cancer has spread. The Ramseys were once again devastated, so soon after Beth's death, to be facing death yet again. Patsy said she questioned why God would give her 2 beautiful young children only to take her away from them when they would need her the most. She was enrolled in a rigorous experimental program at the National Institutes of Health's National Cancer Institute in Bethesda, Maryland, and a protocol called for a week of chemotherapy treatment in Bethesda every month, followed by recovery and a battery of tests in Boulder before returning for another depleting treatment in Bethesda. She lost her hair and was often too weak to get out of bed. The spectre of death was always close to her. This routine went on for many, many months, during which she saw many of her new friends and fellow cancer battlers in the program weaken and die. She eventually made it, attributing her miraculous cure to a combination of first-rate medical care, emotional support from her husband and children, and God. It was 2 of them things. Well, one of them things. It was the medical care. The emotional support helped. So 1.5 really.
I mean,
but I'm not having God doing that.
I mean, like,
I think God was like, there you go. cured your cancer. She's like, oh, why can't you bring my baby back from the dead? He's like, I fucking cured your cancer. Yeah, everyone gets one.
That's how religious people would put it. But it's like maybe your constitution was just a bit like more.
Maybe it was like you have a full week of chemotherapy by the best doctors in America and you're having the best medical care.
Because you're getting like that paid for you.
Yeah.
Like.
Anyway, the detectives left the Ferniers' house disappointed they'd not been able to secure the interview. And with the Ramseys leaving town for the funeral and burial in Georgia, they felt the pair was slipping out of their grasp. By the time of the memorial service, this unusual and tantalizing case was already aroused great public attention. The Ramseys' attorneys hired Washington, D.C. media consultant and former reporter Patrick Courtin to handle television and press and keep them one step removed from John and Patsy, as well as the attorneys themselves. Now, this was yet another move that brought a flood of criticism. The Ramseys were trying to manage the news. Fleetwood was apparently troubled by their girding themselves with lawyers and suggested the best way to get the story out was to go on national television and just tell the story. So they addressed this by agreeing to appear on CNN in Atlanta the day after the burial, January the 1st, 1997. They will be interviewed by veteran reporter Brian Cable, who coincidentally went to college with Mark Olshaker. Towards the end of the interview, Cable honed in on the question everyone wanted to ask. The police said there is no killer on the loose. Do you believe that someone is outside your home? There is a killer on the loose, Patsy said. And then John was like, yeah, absolutely. And then Patsy went on just like,
yeah, absolutely.
Patsy was like, I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's a he or she, but if I was a resident of Boulder, I would tell my friends, keep your babies close to you. There's someone out there. So by this time, the story has gone global, and the Boulder mayor, Leslie Durgan, who knew the Ramseys, called a press conference on January 3rd and said, people have got no need to fear that someone's wandering the streets of Boulder. And, you know, it's always been portrayed by some people looking for young children. Boulder is safe. It's always been safe. It continues to be a safe community. So, you know, throwing shade at Patsy there. So the day before the second thrust of globalization of the Ramsey murder story had taken place, ABC's Denver affiliate ran videos taken officially for sale to parents and friends, and probably on the black market, at the All-Star pageant in which JonBenet competed on December the 17th. There was an amateur video of a Royal Miss competition at the shopping centre. Finally, an official video from the National Sunburst pageant held in Atlanta during the summer of 1996, shown in which JonBenet was wearing sparkly white Vegas and Ziegfeld Follies style outfit. These images brought most of the public into a world that Dad didn't even know existed and made them wonder what kind of parents would allow or encourage their children to enter these pageants where little girls imitate big ones. The Ramseys would be quick to point out that many little girls and their families participated in them, particularly in the South where they came from. Just saying they do it in the South, that
it's the South. They do different. They do it differently.
They do. They marry the cousins and shit like that. It was JonBenet's own choice, apparently. You know, this 6-year-old wanted to get involved. She'd loved dressing up and performing since she was 3, and I begged her mother to let her do it. At home, she even made her mother pretend to be the MC and announced JonBenet walking down the runway. So it was no different, they said, from parents involving in Little League, Cub Scouts or Brownies, skating or any other type of performing. Anyone who saw anything suggestive or inappropriately sexual was reading into it. The pageants developed confidence.
But they overly sexualise it, and they do.
Les, they developed confidence, talent and poise, and many other participants dreamed of growing up and going on to be Miss America.
That is bullshit. I'm sorry.
Patsy and her sister Pam had been in Miss America. Didn't win it. Well, you know,
oh well, that's suspect in itself.
Yeah, but regardless of any explanation or decidedly unapologetic statements John and Patsy would make to countless millions of viewers around the world, the images spoke for themselves. These were rich, arrogant parents who were alone in the house the night their daughter was killed. They refused to cooperate with the police, surrounded themselves with lawyers, and they dressed up their little 6-year-old girl with lipstick and rouge and tinted hair and glittery makeup and suggestive outfits that made her look like a Vegas showgirl. What kind of people were these? So despite a massive investigative effort into the ensuing months and years, the outlines and contours of the case remain pretty much what they've been from almost the start. Police concentration on John and Patsy Ramsey as the prime suspects in the homicide of their daughter, and ever-mounting tension between police and the DA's office. Police could reasonably say that their prime focus remained on the Ramseys because that was who they believed did it, just as the focus of the LAPD in the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman remained on OJ. There was no evidentiary reason to look anywhere else. Now, the police certainly believed this, and it has been reported that a former unit at Quantico, like the FBI place, believed it.
Yeah.
So it's certainly what the tabloid press, most legitimate journalism, and vast majority of the public believed, but as the case matured, a number of people became increasingly troubled that it wasn't just adding up the way it should if the identity of the unsub was clear-cut as the Boulder PD. Yeah. So I'm using the word unsub there because we use it in CSI. And also Criminal Minds, the unsub. So the disarray of the investigation was clear. Now, Sergeant Larry Mason had been removed by LA as lead investigator for leaking information to the media. He was later cleared, and by May 1997, detectives Linda Arndt and Melissa Hickman had also been removed from the case. One of the issues with the police and the Ramseys was that despite the belief that either John or Patsy did it, the investigators disagreed about which one. So the initial report had been that semen was found on the victim, which would suggest a male offender, but the report was not panning out. And by March, handwriting sample analyses were brought in by police and eliminated John Ramsey as the writer of the note, but said they couldn't eliminate Patsy. So the speculation had been shifted off to her. In September, a search of the Ramsey home uncovered fibres that appeared to match the cord used to bind JonBenet, but the roll the duct tape had come from and the remainder of the cord were not found, which suggested that unlike the notepad and the pen from the ransom note, the broken paintbrush handle from the net ligature, the cord and duct tape originated from outside the house. Only weeks after the search, lead investigator John Eller was replaced by Commander Mark Beckney. A little over a month after that, the police union passed a no-confidence motion against Chief Tom Kobe, who later announced he would resign. Within a few days, Eller also announced that he planned to resign. Ultimately, Kobe was replaced by Beckney, but by the 1-year anniversary of the murder, despite the focus on the Ramseys, no suspects had been named and no arrests had been made. Alex Hunter brought in famed forensic scientist Dr. Henry Lee. Do you remember Dr. Lee?
I remember Dr. Lee. He's back.
He's there with his back-breaking work that he doesn't do any of.
He's like that doctor from Jurassic Park. Henry Wu, isn't he? He's the Henry Wu.
He's evil, he is.
He's a right cunt.
Yeah, and the attorney and DNA legal specialist Barry Scheck as consultants. So far, none of them, they've not done fuck all. Dr. Lee's there going, it's back-breaking work, he did fuck all. So rather than narrowing the focus, new pieces of potential evidence often raise more questions than they answered. Now, Detective Steve Thomas, he put great faith in the fact that JonBenet had been apparently ingested pineapple the evening of her death, contrary to what the Ramseys said, yet seemed to discount what many considered to be a major finding, that DNA definitely not belonging to JonBenet and not belonging to either of her parents or anyone else tested was found in her pants and under her fingernails.
That's one of them weird ones where pineapple just voids.
No, it's just it was in her intestines. So she'd eaten pineapple, but they're like, she hasn't eaten it.
She hasn't.
But there's a bowl of pineapple in the kitchen and they're like, I don't know where it's come from.
This is really weird. It's got those, I'm very much thinking, like, you got a weird Santa dressed, man.
Oh, we'll get to that. But moving into 1998, a little demonstrable progress was being made. Trying to move forward, Boulder PD had been lobbying for a grand jury investigation, fearing that such an entity can compel testimony that they couldn't. On March 22nd, a grand jury of 4 women and 8 men was impaneled. Its work began on September the 15th. By that time, though, the case had not progressed, and there was a major development on the personnel front. Steve Thomas submitted a letter of resignation to Chief Bettner complaining about the handling of the investigation by the police and the interference from the DA's office in not charging the Ramseys. He doubted that justice would ever be done for JonBenet. On September the 20th, Lou Smith submitted his own letter of resignation to the DA's Hunter, saying, "I cannot in good conscience be part of the persecution of innocent people. It would be highly improper and unethical for me to say when I so strongly believe this." So the second anniversary of the murder came and went without any suspects. John Ramsey had lost his job with Access Graphics. He believed it was because he was perceived as a corporate liability because of all the negative publicity. And he was probably right about that. On March 19th, 1999, Detective Linda Arndt resigned from the department, and she described how she looked into John Ramsey's eyes and she knew what had happened. The inference most people drew from her statement was that John was the killer. Steve Thomas had been access to the same evidence that Arndt had available, concluded that Patsy had been the killer, and that John wasn't involved until the cover-up. The grand jury's terms were scheduled to expire on April 21st, 1999, but on April 7th it was extended for another 6 months since its work was far from complete. On October the 13th, 1999, Alex Hunter and the grand jury announced that it had found insufficient evidence to indict anyone in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Some speculated that the final decision might have been Hunter's, because under Colorado law, both the grand jury foreman and the district attorney must sign a true bill of indictment for it to take effect. Steve Thomas condemned Hunter for not indicting the Ramseys and letting the jury decide the truth. Attorney and Harvard law professor Alan Dershowitz declared Hunter a constitutional hero for taking all the barbs and not bringing a case to trial he didn't feel could be supported. This is the same Alan Dershowitz who worked on the OJ case.
Yeah,
for OJ.
yeah.
This was just one more example of the huge and seemingly unbridgeable divisions the case had engendered. So what happened, Les? Nobody knows, but we're gonna have a look at some possibilities now.
I think it's the Santa.
Right. But first scenario, Patsy accidentally kills JonBenet in a fit of anger. So JonBenet's come in, Mom, I've wet the bed again. And Patsy's like, "Oh, I'm sick of this shit." Smacks her across the head, and maybe JonBenet fell over, hit her head, or something like that.
I mean, that's Occam's razor, the simplest explanation.
Or, same scenario, but JonBenet gets sassy and says, "So I don't want to do beauty pageants, and I hate him." Now Patsy's basically going, no, because she's living her own fantasies vicariously through JonBenet.
Oh, yeah.
So Patsy snaps, strikes it, hits it, she's like, oh! She hits JonBenet, hits her head, and it's just a fluke thing that she dies or she's really injured.
Yeah.
So, right, Patsy's smacked her, she's hit her head, oh! So she's running up panic. She goes up to the bedroom, shakes her, she's like, "Oh, I've killed JonBenet in a fit of anger. I don't know what came over me, what I'm going to do." So John gets up and he's like, "What happened?" So she says, "Oh, I've hit her." She hits her head on the dresser and he's like, "Okay, let's take her to the hospital. She's had an accident." Patsy's like, "No, what happens is see my handprint across her face or shoulder or wherever she hit her."
Or just done her,
and realise what happened. And he's like, "Okay, we better make it look like a botched kidnapping." So how do we do that? "Okay, we need a ransom note and we need to make it look like the kidnapper killed her. So tie her hands together and fashion a garrote tightly around her neck to strangle her. And just in case the kidnapping isn't believable, I better make it look like she was sexually molested." And you go on from there.
And
yeah. So, it is slightly absurd. But, that's kind of what you got to think. But that's the leading.
It's out there, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite out there.
So, but there's a book. Detective Steve Thomas wrote a book, JonBenet Inside the Ramsey Murder Investigation. It says he believes that there was already tension between Patsy and JonBenet on Christmas Day based on like Charles willfully refusing to wear the dress and mum had selected for her. After dinner at the Whites, Ramsey's came home and put the kids to bed. Patsy's knackered, and the hecticness of the holidays, preparations for the trip. She says she didn't want, apparently Thomas says she didn't want to make it. Now, Thomas speculates that JonBenet wet the bed and woke up. The red turtleneck found balled up in the bathroom must have been what she wore to bed. Patsy stripped it off, and she came wet and redressed her in the clothing. Now, he says he never believed the child was sexually abused for the gratification of the offender, but the vaginal trauma or some sort of corporal punishment. The dark fibres found in a pubic region could have come from violent wiping of a wet child. But it doesn't really add up, because the abrasions around the inner wall of a vagina certainly seem to result from some digital sexual penetration, but suggestion they actually resulted from Patsy forcefully wiping it brutally enough to do, that's hard to imagine.
Yeah.
Now, in any event, Thomas postulates some sort of explosive encounter in the child's bathroom where she was slammed against a hard surface. At that point, Patsy was overtaken by panic, what she'd done. She said she couldn't take him to the ER, so she moved her daughter's body down to the basement, where she went back upstairs to the kitchen, wrote the ransom note from her own tablet to make the crime appear to be a kidnapping. Now, for the next several hours, she fine-tuned everything, placing the 3-page note where it was found, put a piece of duct tape over her mouth, all that stuff. And they could have put the cords or the things in neighbours' trash cans. Then she discovered the note, alerted her husband, and set the events. When Officer Rick French responded to 911 call before 6 a.m., Patsy was still wearing the outfit she'd had on the evening before. She'd never gone to bed. Evidently, she was too busy. So, that is kind of plausible.
It's there.
Yeah. So in March 1997, Alex Hunter hired a retired El Paso County Sheriff's Department homicide detective named Lou Smith to conduct an investigation on behalf of the DA's office. Now, El Paso County is due south of Denver, and it encompasses Colorado Springs and the U.S. Air Force Academy. Now, Smith had acquired legendary status in Colorado as a brilliant investigator with an astounding 90% clearance rate on more than 200 homicides. Now, in his wallet, he kept a plastic folder with pictures of some of the victims for who he obtained justice. A bit weird. Like, these are me kids. These are the people. So, Smith examined all the evidence and concluded that the intruder had killed JonBenet. He believed that a paedophile who had seen JonBenet in public dressed up decided to go after her that night, broke into the house while they were celebrating with the Whites. Now, the offender probably went in through the grate in the window to the basement, then explored the entire house, used Patsy's pen and paper to write the ransom note. Then, before the family returned home, he hid and waited for them. Once he convinced they were all asleep, he went to JonBenet's bedroom and immobilized her with a stun gun applied twice directly to her skin. He taped over her mouth with duct tape and brought her in with him and carried her unconscious down to the basement, where he could remove her from the house without disturbing the parents on the 3rd floor. He found Patsy's paint box and broke off a brush handle to fashion a garrote with the cord he'd brought. Now, this was some sort of erotic fantasy for me. Where he, violated her sexually. The unidentified DNA under JonBenet's nails and in her underpants, the unidentified pubic hair, an unidentified palm print on the door, a high-tech brown boot print on the floor, and a scuff mark on the wall all came from the unsub, according to Smith's theory. The fingernail deposits occurred when JonBenet awakened and tried to fight him off. That when he panicked, he struck her on the head, possibly with a flashlight. Believing he'd killed her, he left the body and escaped the house, taking with him the articles he brought, the cord, the duct tape, and stun gun. He also said he had an interesting alternate theory to the $118,000 figure. If the intruder was planning to flee to Mexico at the exchange rate, in fact at the time, $118,000 would have yielded 1,000,000 pesos. So his theory took shape when, studying photographs of JonBenet's body, he noticed 2 sets of small red welts on her skin. Each was the same, the 2 marks in the same relationship to each other. So he thought that was going to be the stun gun. So basically, Smith said, they were consistent with the stun gun, but he couldn't say for sure without examining the body himself. Now, many people believe that her older brother, Burke Ramsey, was responsible for the death. Now, people think his motivation was jealousy because his sister was getting way more attention than he was. This conspiracy also places murder cover-up blame on her parents because they were scared they would lose both of their children. This theory remains popular despite Burke's exoneration by DNA evidence in 2008. So It's been disproven, but everyone's like, yeah, well, you can prove anything with facts, can't you? So, Michael Helgoth, now he was a local in Boulder. He was a bad boy and a prominent suspect for a young beauty queen's death. John Kennedy, a former employee of Helgoth, said that Helgoth told him a month before JonBenet's murder that him and a partner had a big deal coming in where they would make about $60,000 each. Helgoth also told Kennedy that he wondered what it would be like to crush a human skull. So,
what?
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
I mean, it's not just a bit weird. That's very weird. Like, do you wake up and think, like, oh, I wonder what it's like?
Crush a human
skull.
Not really. But Helgoth was found dead in his bedroom from what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Later it came to light that circumstances of his death actually pointed to murder, which had been framed to look like suicide.
What the fuck?
So, after the local district attorney announced that the list of JonBenet murder suspects had narrowed, Helgoth died 2 days later of that suicide. A 48 hours investigation ruled out Helgoth's DNA was present at the crime of the scene. Or was it Santa Claus, Les?
I think it was Santa Claus.
So, Bill McReynolds was playing Santa Claus at the Ramsey house 2 nights before a murder. He gave JonBenet a card that said, "You will receive a very special gift after Christmas." To add suspicion to this conspiracy, McReynolds' daughter went missing 22 years before Ramsey's death, to the exact date, and his wife had written a book about a young girl being murdered in a basement. But DNA tests cleared him, and he died in 2002. So Gary Olivier was a convicted sex offender and was questioned in 2002 for her murder. Now, at the time of her death, he lived near the Ramsey's home and eventually created a shrine for the little girl, saying her death greatly affected him.
Well, that's really weird.
He put her face on Monopoly money. So they made a shrine, face on Monopoly money.
He's trying to get this nationally distributed.
So in his 2002 arrest, he was also in possession of a stun gun, which they thought, JonBenet, but his DNA again didn't match anything from the crime scene. So Linda Hoffman Pugh, who, Patsy said, I think it's her. She said Linda had a key to the house and had money troubles. The theory goes that she lured JonBenet to the basement and killed her for the ransom money. However, the evidence against Pugh is circumstantial and she's never been formally accused.
But she didn't actually, properly ransom her, though.
No. It's a shit ransom, yeah. In the year 2000, a California woman told authorities she'd been sexually abused as a child by adults using devices similar to the garrote found around JonBenet's neck. She claimed these adults were part of a widespread sex ring and suggested they could have been behind JonBenet's murder. Or was JonBenet killed in a satanic sacrifice, Les?
Never. That never happened.
Apparently, a brotherhood term for devil is JonBenet. Which is quite similar to her already unique first name.
That's reaching, though.
There was also a sacrificial ritual commonly performed on Christmas Eve called the last bulb of the Christmas tree, which is a bit coincidental. Do you remember when at work they were asking for our Christmas traditions? And people were saying oh, we do this and oh, we do this. And me and you said we do the last bulb of the Christmas tree.
I remember that. Yeah.
And they'd never use that, did they?
No. I also put taking death out of the village, where you parade a fucking doll.
I don't know. I don't know why people at work hate us.
I love that. And when certain people say, I'm very witchy, I'll get this sorted. And it's just you're not though. You don't.
So, I'm going into
There's a tangent coming.
No, I'm going into it. These are the more out there theories, okay? Aliens, filled with the jealous rage over JonBenet's beauty and grace, decided to murder her. So, they said it was a foreign faction. What's more foreign than aliens?
It's Lithuanian dwarves.
The Asia-Pacific American Coalition was an active liberal political group operating out of Colorado University.
It's just too much.
The request for $118,000 written in ransom note could have actually been code for JonBenet's time of death, which aligns well with her actual time of death, around 1:18 a.m. As if the conspiracy theory isn't already crazy enough, AIPAC disbanded just weeks after the murder. Here, but you ready for the most mental guy?
Go on.
John Mark Carr. So, in 2005, John Mark Carr began an email correspondence with Michael Tracy, a University of Colorado professor and expert on the JonBenet case. Using the pseudonym Daxis, Carr admitted to killing JonBenet. He shared details from the crime scene and said he'd been in love with the child before her accidental death.
What?
Now, authorities traced his emails to Thailand, of course, where they found Carr, who at the time was teaching at an elementary school. The police arrested him but found that his DNA did not match any of the samples found on JonBenet and around the crime scenes. He was eventually acquitted of the murder but still maintains that he knew and loved the 6-year-old. Throughout this strange episode, though, the Ramseys maintained they did not believe Carr was the killer or even knew the daughter. Their dismissal of his confession once again brought up the idea of what they really happened, which is why they didn't believe Carr's reimagined version of that night. So, a wolf killed JonBenet Ramsey. Just to repeat this, some people believe a 6-year-old was murdered by a wolf, but the wolf didn't compose the ransom note and tie her up. But there were animal hairs found near the body of the crime scene.
Also...
So, wait. This would hold up that she was attacked by a wolf, right? And her parents freaked out, thinking they would get in trouble for child neglect. So they covered up a wolf's murder by staging a kidnapping. But more reasonable people think the killer just happened to own a wolf dog and the hairs were just secondary transfers.
I think wolf would leave a lot more mess, and it would.
But this is my personal favourite one. Okay. Are you ready for this one, lads?
Go on.
JonBenet didn't die, but she became Katy Perry.
What, as in?
As in, I kissed a girl and I liked it, Katy Perry.
Oh, that Katy Perry.
So, here's the proof for it, right? Suspend your disbelief. Katy Perry's parents, try to say that fast, look not entirely dissimilar to JonBenet's parents, John and Patty Ramsey.
I think
JonBenet and Katy Perry have similar facial structures, sort of. JonBenet was killed by strangulation, which somehow suggests Masonic influence.
Why? Why always with the Masonic, fucking influence?
Don't know. In a biography, Katy Perry is quoted as saying, as a child, "Not that I was one of those stage kids. There was no JonBenet Ramsey inside of me waiting to burst out." Also, and perhaps most damning, Katy Perry once tweeted the lyrics to God Bless America, a song which JonBenet once sang, the recording of which was played over and over as part of the media coverage after her death.
Did you get this off 4chan?
Yeah, this is off YouTube. But my favourite one. You ready?
Let's go.
JonBenet Ramsey was killed because her father refused to back the plans for 9/11. That's right. So John Ramsey's company had just been bought by Lockheed Martin.
Right.
They really run America, right?
They don't.
They do.
They don't.
So John Ramsey took a seat on the board, which is code for the shadow government, and they brought up plans for 9/11. Now, John Ramsey was discussing it and said, "I will not go along with this." But as we all know, You don't disagree with the shadow government, and they killed JonBenet as a warning to him to toe the line, or they were framing him as his daughter's killer. Now, this is backed up by the lack of mobilization of the FBI to the crime scene. Now, the CEO of Lockheed Martin even went on record as saying it was strange, as they had protocol, and if someone's family member was kidnapped, the whole board would receive a call and security would be sent out to guard them, but it didn't happen. So John Ramsey went back to the shadow government, agreed to 9/11, and the rest is history.
I mean...
And thus ends the conspiracy. We've solved it. We've solved JonBenet Ramsey's murder. Shadow government.
Clearly it was the shadow government.
Out of Wolf, shadow government, or Katy Perry, I'm going for shadow government.
I'm going for Santa. I think Santa.
But he was cleared by DNA. Do you tell you he wasn't cleared by DNA?
Do you know why Santa was cleared by DNA?
Why?
Because he's fucking Santa.
It's not real. But do you tell you he wasn't
No,
cleared?
but he is.
Do you know he wasn't cleared by DNA evidence? Shadow government.
And Santa.
Were the shadow government cleared by DNA evidence?
No,
Were they? Yes or no?
No, they weren't. But who were the shadow government like fucking covering for? Santa.
No. The Masons.
It's always the fucking Masons.
I don't know why. I know a few Freemasons. They got,
and they're pretty chill.
You have to, when you do the handshake, you do that, but you like sort of wipe your finger like out on them. So you go, that's a Masonic handshake. Did you know that?
No, I don't.
Someone at work showed me because the dad's a Freemason. So there you go.
I've known some Masons in my life.
Yeah.
They do the same. They were like joining up. I'm like, I'm alright.
Yeah, I'm like, don't want to overthrow the world. But yeah, there you go. We've solved JonBenet Ramsey's murder. It was the shadow government because the dad won't agree to with fucking 9/11.
Clearly.
It might as well be that at this point, I'd be. But yeah.
Let's just throw the Benjamin. I'm not doing it. Let's just throw Benjamin Netanyahu in there. I think it was Benjamin Netanyahu dressed as Santa
and working for the shadow government and the reverse vampires for the Rand Corporation. There we go.
All Randist. And that's the thing, it all comes back to Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand, it does. It all comes back to Ayn Rand and her libertarian.
We're through the looking glass.
We're through the looking glass.
But thank you for spending your Christmas day with us. I hope you enjoyed it. You're full of food and all that stuff. Let us know who you think it was. Was it shadow government? Was it a wolf? Or is she actually Katy Perry? Don't know.
I think in many ways, she's the friend.
Who, Katy Perry?
No, Bernice.
Bernice?
That one.
JonBenet.
JonBenet.
Literally been doing this for an hour. And you can't even remember her name.
It's Christmas.
It is Christmas. So, thank you. Let us know who you think killed her. Most people will be there again. Parents, it's the brother, shadow government. But yeah, thank you. Please hit the buttons, all that, like, share, subscribe, notification, bollocks, all that. It really does help us with everyone is getting shafted by YouTube. But pretty soon, because the YouTube CEO said, we're going to help small channels. Do you know what they're doing, Les? For channels under 500,000 subscribers. Because if I've got 150,000 subscribers, apparently I'm a small channel. Yeah. You can hype as soon. It's bollocks. It's pay to win. Don't do it, please. Somebody just come up with a better platform than YouTube and we can go to it. But not one that's going to have all the fucking, like, dickhead Nazis and shit.
That sort of shit.
You know, just not one. Elon Musk, not you. Okay? Dickhead. By the way, by the time this comes out, in the future, or now, America's going to have a new president.
Yeah, they are.
It's going to be weird, isn't it?
That is. He'll be putting out, I need to go toilet.
I don't know who it'd be. But yeah, you go. Go. Merry Christmas.
You carry on. Carry on.
If you do want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find, or X now, as it's edgy. If you want to, or you can email us on enterthedarkpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to support us, you can go to www.patreon.com/enterthedark. Anything from $1 up to $50 will be greatly appreciated and help us out loads to get more equipment, do more stuff, bring the puppets back, do loads of shit. But just being here and watching us and telling people about us is more than enough. Thank you so much. If you want to buy a t-shirt, you can do. The thing is there. QTM put it in here. Hopefully the names have already gone up of our patrons, things like that. But yeah, thanks for being awesome. It's been a rough year for me, but it's okay because we got you guys. So I've been Jan. He's been Les. Quite apt, really, isn't it?
Bobby. The drink.
Yeah, I've been Jan. He's been Les. Take care. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.